Dozens of hospital workers outfitted in their scrubs, just basically awaiting victims to treat. At this point, what we're hearing is that the pace has slowed down considerably. We've just been briefed by the president of St. Vincent's, that is David Campbell. He says at the moment there are 319 patients at St. Vincent's. Of that, 50 to 55 are listed in critical condition. He also confirmed that there were 3 deaths at St. Vincent's. Also, New York Governor George Pataki stopped by. He spoke to the doctors as well as the victims. One of the doctors overseeing the operations in the emergency room today described some of the injuries that they saw early on. He said at the very early stages of this tragedy, what they saw were severe burns, a lot of trauma, and a lot of heart-related problems. Now, he said the heart attacks and cardiac arrest could be from pre-existing heart conditions or possibly induced by the trauma that the people saw at the World Trade Center today. Now, tomorrow they expect to get a different type of injury. Right now, the Trade Center is considered a hot zone. There are no rescue efforts underway, the doctor said, but tomorrow they expect that hot zone to be lifted, rescue workers to go back in. What they will be expecting then is what they call crush injuries, and that could be broken bones, anything that happens by people being buried underneath rubble, kidney failure, dehydration, and the like. They're expecting to see a whole different variety of injuries tomorrow. So again, from St. Vincent's, which has been a triage unit throughout the day, the scene has slowed down a little bit, but they do expect it to pick back up when the rescue efforts resume. Paula, back to you.
All right, thanks so much, Greg. And during your report, I just got more information that the New York Police Department now confirms that there are 78 police officers on its force that are missing tonight. Right now, I'm going to turn to Richard Holbrooke, former UN ambassador, to provide some sort of perspective for us this evening. Mr. Holbrooke, we have heard General Shelton describe today's vicious acts as outrageous acts of barbaric terrorism. Senator Orrin Hatch called it an act of war. Senator John Warner calling it the most tragic hour of American history. What is your perspective on this evening?
Well, first of all, Paula, as a New Yorker and somebody who had the honor of being guarded by the New York City Police and working with the firemen, I am stricken beyond words at the information you've just mentioned about the death toll among the police and the firemen. I used to work in that building and was there next door during the previous attack, and as in the 1993 case, New York City citizens have responded in this extraordinary way. Your description of the attempt to give blood is so emblematic, those lines, and I'm just heartbroken about this. In terms of your question, and having listened to your interview with Madeleine Albright, I just want to add something to what she said, and that is this. In the past, Osama bin Laden and other terrorists who do not represent national governments, a distinction which is critically important, but are sheltered in various countries in the world, including Afghanistan, sometimes North Korea, Iraq, Libya, have played this shell game about where the government that shelters them and protects them says, well, we don't know where they are. I think it is absolutely essential for the United States to lead an international effort now that makes clear that any country which shelters people is part of an act of war against the United States. The United States, Paula, cannot make the response alone. It is true, as Madeleine said, that we have the finest military force in the world, and I've been privileged to work with them for over 30 years in Vietnam, in Bosnia, and all over the world. But I will tell you that unless we have international united front of the European allies, the Russians, the Chinese, and I want to stress this, the moderate Arab states, which must close ranks to get the extremists who are behind this, we're not going to be able to succeed. This is the beginning. After we get through the rescue phase, after we find out how the security failure occurred that you referred to, that Wolf Blitzer referred to earlier, we're going to have to turn to an absolutely non-stop diplomatic effort to create the pressure behind which we can take the necessary military action against this act of war.
All right, I hear what you're saying, Ambassador, but it was Henry Kissinger who said earlier on today that we will be able to, or the United States at least, will be able to judge its friends by their level of support in trying to figure out who unleashed this fury today. What, though, realistically, do you think will happen in terms of resistance from some of these countries?
I'm sorry, I don't understand your question. I heard the interview with Henry Kissinger, and he and I are in full agreement on this. Any government which shelters the people who did this has to be held equally responsible for it as an act of war. And we are going to have to mobilize an international coalition for that position as we prepare to take the necessary military responses. And I know that Henry agreed with that because I listened to the interview.
Oh, no, I don't think I'm saying that anybody has misinterpreted the interview here, but I think there has been some suggestion by other guests that you may not get complete support here.
No, I don't know whether we'll get complete support or not. The Taliban is denying any influence in this thing, but all the evidence seems to suggest that. John King and others on your excellent coverage have suggested that the administration is 90% sure it's Osama bin Laden. If some countries don't participate, let them understand that they're joining a coalition of terrorists who have declared war on the United States. The key nations involved are going to be the moderate Arab states, the Russians, and the Chinese and other countries which must isolate the cause of this. Osama bin Laden is not a government, but if he is indeed, as the administration appears to believe, behind this, anyone trafficking with him should be on notice that that is tantamount to an act of war by a government. And I talked this afternoon to the Secretary General of the UN, Kofi Annan, who is trying to deal with the consequences of this for the UN. He's going to have to decide whether to postpone or cancel some major UN meetings that are coming up in New York, a children's summit in 10 days. And he has been talking to Arab leaders, and I think he will be very supportive of this. The UN will meet in General Assembly tomorrow to start the condemnation process, and we're going to have to conduct diplomacy alongside rescue and finally decide what the correct military response is.
Mr. Holbrook, we're going to have to leave it there this evening. Thank you very much for your insights and some of your poignant thoughts on what it was like to have once worked in one of those buildings that no longer exists. Joining me right now is Jeff Greenfield, who has some thoughts on the magnitude of what was witnessed here today. I know Senator Dodd earlier today compared this to the equivalent of the bombing of Pearl Harbor.
Right, and you know, he said, I don't think that overstates it. We may find out it will understate it. When Franklin Roosevelt told us that many American lives were lost on that December 8th speech, he was talking about 2,400 American servicemen and women. Unless a miracle happened 2.5 miles south of here, we are looking at a death toll that could dwarf that. The largest act of violence in American history, Oklahoma City, 168 dead. More people than that died just in the plains. And when you and I as New Yorkers look and we realize the landscape of New York has changed, the Empire State Building is once again the largest building, I would suggest to you the landscape of America has changed. We are going to wake up tomorrow in a different country. Our luck has run out. 6 people died at the World Trade Center in '93. We saved thousands more because the buildings didn't collapse. We averted terrorist acts in the past, not today. And I think we will not get on an airplane the same way again. We will not feel the same way about our security again. I looked at some numbers, Paula. The largest number of American dead ever in one day in this country was Antietam, the Civil War battle in Maryland in 1862, 22,000 dead. I hope to God we don't approach that number when all is said and done, but we're going to be possibly in that ballpark. And I think tomorrow, in some ways, may even be a worse day than today because the sheer magnitude of this event has kind of got everybody just excited and wondering. Tomorrow, the reality sets in.
And I think you also talked earlier today how that reality turns from a sense of shock and, in some cases, a sense of outrage.
We've already heard
what has
absolutely
been handed this country.
And one of the biggest issues we're going to be facing is drawing the line between a response that equals the horror of what was done and restraint.
All right, got to cut you off here and go back quickly to Wolf Blitzer. I think Dick Armey is joining you.
All right, Paula, just to remind our viewers that in a little bit more than a half an hour from now, President Bush will be in the Oval Office to address the American public. He's preparing his remarks right now, but our congressional correspondent, Jonathan Karl, is up on Capitol Hill, and he has the House Majority Leader Dick Armey with him. John?
Well, Wolf, an amazing day up here, and we just had about 200 members of Congress, Democrats, Republicans, senators, and members of the House on the steps of the Capitol with a message. Now, we have here the Majority Leader Dick Armey, Republican leader in the House of Representatives. Mr. Armey, you were one of those in the top leadership of the Congress that were whisked away from the Capitol this morning to a secure location, a classified location. What was it like in that room all day today?
Well, we had the bipartisan leadership of both the House and the Senate. We were, of course, obviously, like everybody in America, seeking information, trying to understand exactly what's happening, where is it coming from, who's responsible, and how do we respond, measuring the threat to the nation and preparing ourselves to bring the members of Congress back to work at the appropriate time under the right circumstances and make the point that I made earlier. You may scar democracy, but you don't shut it down. We'll be back to work tomorrow. We think of this as a horrible criminal act. It is just inhumane. It's insane. And the American House and Senate, the Congress of this nation, as the President of this nation, will address that tonight. We will address the nation's business this week, and we will continue the process of finding the people who are responsible and bringing them to justice.
Now, I understand that at least 4 times during the day, the Vice President briefed the members of the leadership that were in that room at that classified location. What did you learn about that 4th plane, the plane that landed in western Pennsylvania?
Well, we learned some things about that. At this point, the information is classified. It is clear that we do have a good investigation going forward. We are gathering information. There is a confidentiality on what we know, but we do know that this is a serious, premeditated crime, and that I can say without any doubt or hesitation, it's an international crime, and we will be able to find the people responsible in America. I believe, with the cooperation of all civilized nations, will bring these people to justice.
Now, over the Capitol Police radios this morning, there was a report that there was a plane headed for the Capitol building. What can you tell us about that? Was the Capitol in danger at any time during the day?
I don't know. We've tried to distill exactly what that report might have been. It could have been somebody's interpretation of the heading of either the plane that went to the Pentagon or the plane that went down in Pennsylvania. But there was a concern about the Capitol that caused Capitol Police, I think correctly and prudently, to vacate the building.
All right. Well, Mr. Leader, I thank you very much for joining us. And Wolf, tomorrow, both the House and the Senate will reconvene. Very much this message that wants to be sent here is that terrorism will not stop the people's business, the work of the Congress from going forward.
All right, Jonathan Karl on Capitol Hill, thank you very much, and thank Mr. Armey as well. I want to bring in Senator Bob Graham of Florida. He's the chairman of the Senate Intelligence Committee. Of course, he's been receiving regular briefings throughout the day. We're hearing a lot of suspicions, Senator Graham, about who may have been responsible. Can you share what you know about that responsibility with our viewers?
I would agree with Madeleine Albright. It's premature at this point to be identifying who the prime suspect might be. The number of potential suspects based on the complexity of this operation is relatively small, and I think we will soon be able to identify who the culprit is, but tonight is not the night.
Has anybody definitively made any conclusions in the briefings with you and your colleagues about responsibility? Because, as you know, a lot of finger pointing at Osama bin Laden has been going on throughout the day.
No, at this point there has not been a single primary suspect identified.
Given the nature of this operation, the highly coordinated hijacking of these 4 airliners, is there some suspicion as well in the U.S. intelligence community that perhaps some government may also have been involved?
Again, it's premature to try to determine who did it and who their collaborators might have been. One thing we do know is that we are going to, as a result of this and other incidents, reassess our ability to identify and prevent this kind of event in the future. Right now, we're in the stage of responding to a horrendous event rather than where we should be, which is congratulating on ourselves on the fact that we identified and were able to interdict the culprits before they were able to act.
One of your colleagues on the Intelligence Committee, Senator Orrin Hatch of Utah, told us earlier today that as far as he had been informed,